On today's show, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers blew a lead, lost a game, and still woke up in first place. That's the NFC South in December, and the Bucs season is officially down to 3 games, 2 wins, and 0 excuses. Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report podcast, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find us online, BucsReport.com. And the best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe to the Bucs Report on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. So in this edition of the Bucs Report, things are about as bad as they possibly can be for this team. I did not have an episode for you guys last week as I was sick along with my children, but how much a difference a week or so can make that the team was playing so well. And it doesn't seem like it was that long ago that the Buccaneers were on top of the world, top of the NFC South, which they still are. If you can believe it. It speaks to how bad the NFC South truly is. But complacency, poor play, injuries, bad coaching have all been drawn into focus, and the future of this season is definitely being drawn into question. And some people might say, Dan, have you taken a look at the standings? The last I checked, the Buccaneers are in first place. Yeah, and to that, I would say, how confident and how good do you feel about this team right now, despite the box score lying about this team? And that's ultimately what it is, or the standings rather lying about this team. That had they, played in a different division, that they would not be faring too well right now, because they started out really hot. They overcame adversity to the wide receiver position and the running back position, and Tristan Wirfs to start the season that they found a way to overcome. But now, as players have started to trickle back, we saw Evans in the last game. We saw Jalen, McMillan, that this team, the feeling was, I was saying it as well, is that this team is going to be unstoppable. What we have seen is Baker Mayfield is fallible. He's not as bulletproof, or I hate to say it, maybe as great as we initially thought. Now, we could talk about that being a poor supporting cast. And, when you start hearing people saying it's the creamsicle jerseys, burn those things. And when you start pointing to the jersey that your team's wearing and putting pinning that on while your team lost, well, then I think things are really doom and gloom for your team. But let's dive into it here, talking about how ugly things went here, and in a lot of ways how lucky the Buccaneers are that that Carolina team lost to the Saints here. So the big takeaway to start segment 1 here is the Buccaneers still control their destiny, and that matters more than how ugly it feels right now. And this is a team that is going to have to dig the deepest that it's ever had to dig, because they're playing Carolina. And if you guys don't know, I'll catch you up. The Carolina Panthers are actually pretty good. Yes, this isn't some fever dream. This team that was an absolute dumpster fire last season is good under the leadership and tutelage of a former coach and Dave Canales, if you can believe that. But let's slow this down for a second, because the noise around the team right now is loud, really loud. Losses piling up, late game collapses. Remember those early season late game heroics? And I talked about with Steve Versnick, if it's sustainable. Well, as it turns out, that maybe the Buccaneers got lucky to start this season. And I talked about that as well, is that when
it comes to late game heroics, and it's a coin flip if your team's going to win or lose, that you can feel confident that you won. But even in the beginning of the season where the Buccaneers had to eke out victories, I think that maybe we're seeing that the Bucs, as a matter of fact, got lucky to start this season because the fans right now frustrated. You listen to Rick Stroud, who says that he's not a fan of the team. Rick Stroud and Steve Versnick on Sports Day Tampa Bay always says, listen, I'm not a fan of the Bucs. Well, I'm here to tell you, he sounds pretty pissed off for a guy that's not a fan of a team that he covers. If he was just someone talking about his team as a journalist, I don't think he'd care that much. And you could tell that he does care. But the biggest takeaway heading into the Week 16 is still this. The Buccaneers control their own destiny in the NFC South right now. And it's the games. Atlanta. There is no reason that the Buccaneers should have lost that game. And there is no reason that they should have lost the game the week before to the Saints. In my last episode, I said that, you don't want to fall into a trap game. And what happened? The Bucs lost to the lowly Saints, a team that has absolutely nothing to play for other than to be spoiler to a team that's in contention, in this case, the Buccaneers. And same goes for Kirk Cousins and the Falcons, who took it to the Buccaneers. And I know it doesn't feel good saying that after blowing a 2-touchdown lead at home on Thursday night. The Falcons' loss stung. And there's no way around it. You're up late, the rain is coming down, and the crowd is ready to celebrate, and then suddenly Atlanta walks you off with a field goal. Brutal, season-defining type moment, or at least it felt like it. That the lowest point around this team, and the questions if Carolina, as a matter of fact, does win the NFC South. And I'll talk about a little bit later in this episode and another episode this week about Todd Bowles on the hot seat, the hottest of seats right now. And despite, whatever happens with the Buccaneers this season, unless they win a Super Bowl or make it really a deep push, I think that he has coached his last season in Tampa. But then you take a look at it, the way this team has struggled. And for a few days, it was like the Bucs fell into second place for the first time in over a year. 376 days without looking up at someone else in the division. That's not nothing. But then Sunday hits, the Saints beat Carolina. It's not often that as a Bucs fan, you're rooting for the Saints, but in this case we were. And just like that, everything flipped back. Bucs 500 football right now. Wasn't it 5-1 not too long ago? Bucs 7-7, Panthers 7-7. Tampa Bay holds the tiebreaker. Do we want it to come down to this? Do we want to back into victory? I've been to this movie before when it comes to the Bucs, and ultimately why Bowles still has his job because of the resume. But the clock management and the poor decision making are still something that he struggles with. And that's the part people keep glossing over. Tampa Bay is technically in first place, not because someone gifted it to them, but because of their earlier work. That matters. Those late game heroics, which I spoke to you guys about, is why we're in the position that we're in. If those games obviously had flipped the other way, I would be talking to you about a Buccaneers team on the outside looking in. But now here's where the season really tightens. The next 3 weeks are not abstract. They're not hypothetical. They're crystal clear. Win any 2 of the next 3 games and you win the NFC South. Sweep Carolina and it's over. That's not going to be easy. I think they maybe win 1, but I wouldn't be surprised at this point based on trajectory and what we've seen here that they lose them both. Split Carolina, beat Miami, still over. There's no weird math, no praying for help, no scoreboard watching. And let's be honest, right? This division has been a mess all year. If you want to know what I'm talking about, just take a look around the NFL. And what how many wins first place looks like in the AFC East. 11-3. Steelers 8-6 in the AFC North. Jags 10-4 in the AFC South, and the Broncos 12-2. And then you take a look at the NFC South. The Buccaneers 7-7, 500 football in first place. Bears 10-4, Eagles 9-5. It's not hyperbole. If the Buccaneers were not in this division, they would be out of it, right? Or definitely on the outside looking in. But there's a lot at stake, and they ultimately have to and hope that they can find a way to dig deep, because let's be honest, this division, like I said, has been a mess. Nobody has taken it and said, this is mine. Atlanta has blown opportunities. They were a favorite to do bigger things this year with Penix Jr., right? New Orleans blew opportunities. They need a quarterback. Carolina has been up and down, and Tampa Bay has not capitalized fully either, but they're still here. Confidence level, vibe check, Bucs fans. How confident do you feel about this team? Sitting atop of the NFC South, it's like stealing a kid's lunch money. Good, you have a couple dollars in your wallet, but you stole it from a kid. That's kind of where I feel, or how I feel about the Buccaneers right now. Going to Carolina this week, that's the swing game. Bank of America Stadium, 1 p.m. kickoff, divisional football. You win that game, and suddenly the pressure flips. Carolina becomes the chaser. Tampa Bay becomes the closer. Lose it, and now you're on the ropes. So yeah, it's uncomfortable, but it's also very simple. The Bucs are not out of anything. They're standing right in the middle of it, and that's not something every team can say in late December. Again, it is what it is. It feels a bit to me like stolen valor, but not really. I understand the lay of the land, that the Buccaneers are in the position that they're in due to pulling rabbits out of their hat to start the season. There have not been a whole lot of rabbits coming out of said hats when they should have, right? That the Saints should have been a win. The Falcons should have been a win. They were not. So ultimately, the Buccaneers will have to dig extra deep. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Mike Evans didn't just return. He stabilized the entire offense. I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report podcast, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. Also, you can find this podcast on the Bucs Minicast podcast feed, a part of the Fans for Sports Network. So in segment 2 here, Mike Evans returning, and that gave us the vibes that, wow, we're back. Jalen McMillan back. Wow, we are back, baby. Well, not so fast. That seeing Mike Evans out there, felt good, right? It really did. But ultimately, it was not enough to get it done. So let's just talk about the box score. Baker Mayfield, a 19 for 34 passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. We take a look at the game. Sean Tucker, a touchdown in this game. But Mike Evans for receiving 6 receptions, 132 yards. And then you take a look at Egbuka, who has been not the Egbuka that we remember from earlier this season. Jalen McMillan, who made his return after he was injured. What was it? Preseason against the Steelers, if memory serves. 2 receptions, 38 yards. And that's not too surprising to me, honestly, that the Buccaneers were floundering. Baker was floundering, and it was the first game back in a while for Evans and McMillan that you have to limit expectations, right? But they're back, and that should have been the positive push that you need. So let's talk about what actually looked good, because there was good on Thursday night, and it starts with Mike Evans. If anyone forgot who Mike Evans is, he reminded you real quick. First game back from injury, and he immediately becomes the engine of the offense again. And like I say, it was a good feeling. But again, Mike Evans is often thought that, he's going to do it all. He can't do it all. But what did he do? 6 catches, 132 yards, explosive plays downfield, drawing coverage on every snap. And those chunk plays weren't accidents. 33 yards, 45 yards. That's not schemed fluff. That's Mike Evans being Mike Evans. And a guy, I think that it's safe to say, on the back 9 of his football career, still has that kind of swagger and is ultimately able to draw coverage every time that he's out there. And the thing that stood out most to me wasn't the numbers. It was the confidence shift that I think that the Buccaneers play more confidently when Evans is in the mix. Because I think that when you looked at the game, Baker Mayfield looked different with Evans out there, more decisive at points, more willing to push it, more trust in what he's seeing. Because, when Evans is on the field, defenses have to respect it or he'll make them pay. You see safety shade, corners play softer, windows open. And then Lair and Jalen McMillan, like I said, who was really great to see him back in there. And suddenly this offense looks like it has shape again. Again, it was so close. If you didn't watch the game, I hate to keep banging the drum on it again and again, but it was 29-28 Falcons taking this one. That I think that is what stings the most, is that it was right there for the taking and they weren't able to do it. But, McMillan didn't blow up the stat sheet, but he mattered. Physical in the run game, smart route running, pre-snap motion, creating leverage, and nearly had a touchdown. And that's, again, quite a statement for a guy that has missed a chunk of time here. And Tristan Wirfs talked about the energy these guys brought in the real broken collarbone, broken neck. That's not week to week. That's months of rehab. And if you remember back, I'm having to check my mind here. If I remember right, he was jumping up to catch a football by Teddy Bridgewater and did not go so well for him. And when guys come back from that and immediately bring juice, the locker room feels it. And, take a look at the ripple down effect. Chris Godwin finds the end zone again. Emeka Egbuka continues his rookie surge. Devin Culp finally gets a tight end touchdown on the season. And Sean Tucker keeps finding the end zone at a ridiculous rate. So, when you take a look at the players that stepped up, like I said, Godwin, 4 receptions, 20 yards, a tutty in the game. Those are good things. So, when you just take a look at the players, it's like a chess match, right? That you had Evans, you have Godwin out there, and you have Jalen McMillan, you have Emeka Egbuka. That the excuses really aren't there. You have your weaponry, you have every receiver that you need out there, and still can't pull down the dub. I think that is what is especially frustrating for me, because this offense isn't elite, but it's not dead either. It's been wounded, and that's the difference. And how the Buccaneers won games earlier in the season quite dinged up. And Mike Evans specifically, we can't just gloss over the historical stuff. 43 career 100-yard games, including playoffs. Third most among active players, closing in on 13,000 career yards. Top 10 all-time in receiving touchdowns. And that's Hall of Fame stuff, right? That's franchise cornerstone stuff. So that if Evans stays healthy over these next 3 weeks, the Buccaneers' ceiling rises immediately. But we're going to need these guys to dig deep, because suddenly defenses can't cheat. Suddenly Baker has answers. Suddenly the run game has space, but we need Baker to be Baker. We need the defense to step up, which has been the Achilles of this team for large swaths of the season as well. And in December football, that matters more than the flashy numbers. So that is what we're ultimately hoping for, right, guys? That the Buccaneers can do what they did earlier in the season, and hopefully that breeds success. Hopefully is the operative word. All right, so coming up here after the break, the road is clear, but the Bucs have zero margin for error. I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report podcast, part of the Bucs Report podcast, again, simulcast on the Bucs Minicast podcast feed, a part of the Fans First Sports Network. So let's dive into the final segment of today's show. The road is clear, but the Bucs have zero margin for error. Because let's zoom out and bring it all together, because that's what it's all about. I talked about the game. I talked about the additions, right? Back to the team. Evans, McMillan, Godwin playing a good game. Ultimately not enough to win. But now let's talk about what matters. And that is the path to the playoffs. And not just making the playoffs. This team has got to play better, or you made it to the playoffs and will be sniffed out in a hurry, just like a snuff film. You're going to it's going to end in a hurry. And right now, if the Buccaneers, just based on playing in a truly horrible division, somehow, some way find a way to make it to the playoffs. And I understand they're going to have to win games to get to said playoffs, but they need to play better on all fronts, offensively, defensively. That it was good to see Evans. Hopefully that's amplified. Godwin, McMillan, to see more from Egbuka, Bucky, Tucker. But most importantly here, Baker. We need vintage early season Baker Mayfield, a guy that's going to lift this team on his shoulders and carry him across the finish line. That's where we're at right now, folks, because the path is clear. No mystery, no debate, but the margin for error is razor thin. Carolina twice, Miami once. That is your season. And Carolina is not a pushover. They're right there for a reason. They know if they sweep Tampa, they take the division. That's their motivation. A dumpster fire to winning the NFC South. You want to talk about a rags to riches story? That is what Dave Canales has put together in Carolina. And that's playoff football in December. And, meanwhile in the NFC, there's chaos everywhere. If you didn't know, if you take a look at Mahomes, I feel so bad for Kansas City. I don't. That has turned into a soap opera. But the Bears bouncing up and down in the standings. Rams and Seahawks heading for a heavyweight showdown. Packers banged up but dangerous. And the 49ers lurking. That's the 30,000-foot view of the NFL right now. But none of that matters for us, Bucs fans, if Tampa doesn't handle their own business. Defensively, there are still plays being made, even if the consistency hasn't been there. Hassan Reddick strips sacking quarterbacks. Levante David still forcing fumbles like it's second nature. Chase McLaughlin being historically reliable from deep. That kicker is money from 50 plus, but the success rate ever in tight December games, that's not a footnote. That's a weapon. And how many games are won and lost based on field goal, either making it or not making it? And the pressure is tremendous on the not so sexy names in the NFL. But make no mistake about it, Chase McLaughlin could be a secret weapon for the Bucs. Should come as no surprise. And I don't like games that are won based on a field goal. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I like. A win is a win and a loss is a loss. But when it comes down to making a field goal to win a game, it just, to me, it feels like it needs to be cleaner. And here's the part that gets overlooked. The core has done this before, winning the NFC South titles multiple times, playoff football every year, veterans who understand the December pressure. Levante David, right, that he has been here before, Evans, Godwin, they're no stranger to this. And, Sterling Shepard said it perfectly. Everything they want is right in front of them, not hidden, not complicated. Just do the damn thing that you did to start the season. But wanting it and taking it are two different things, right? This week in Carolina sets the tone for everything. Win, and suddenly the Bucs can smell it again. Lose, and the pressure becomes suffocating. The wheel that was wobbling a little bit is going like this now down the road. And what happens when that wheel wobbles too much? It falls off. I don't want this season to go out in a whimper. Again, to circle back to what I talked about in the first segment, Todd Bowles, and I'll talk about that in the next episode, is really going to have to hope that his team is going to pull a rabbit out of its hat, because he is on the hottest of seats right now. And I expect big changes. I think the Glazers have seen enough that, you see where the Buccaneers started, and, somehow, some way they miss the playoffs or don't make a deep push. Then I think things will get ugly for this organization in a hurry. Expect changes at the head coaching position, those kind of things, and just everything that's associated was Grizzard the right guy? So buckle up, because this season isn't fading out quietly. It's ending with division football, meaningful games, and a chance to make it 5 straight NFC South titles. 2 wins, just 2 wins. That is ultimately all it takes. But like I said, it's ultimately up to the Bucs to get it done. The future is in their hands. Will they seize the day? Will Baker Mayfield reprise his role as Superman again and swoop in and help this team win? Again, the weapons are there. Evans, Godwin, McMillan, Egbuka, Irving, Tucker, Chase McLaughlin, a great quarterback, a defense that's a bit suspect. That's what's going to have to clamp down. Let the offense, hopefully that offense can rekindle those early season vibes and ultimately help lift this Buccaneers team into victory lane. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report podcast network, and also on the Bucs Minicast, part of the Fans First Sports Network. And I'll talk to you guys again next time.